Well, Charlie, thank you so much for taking time to sit down with me today and to talk about storytelling. I know it's something that is near and dear to your heart, and it's something that I am growing to love and getting to know more and more about as the days pass. So thanks for sitting down and
Absolutely.
talking.
Happy to do it.
Absolutely. So, well, I wanted to start our time off because obviously storytelling is a very big part of your life. And so this whole series has been all about talking to people who are storytellers and finding out how they got involved in storytelling from the beginning. So if there's a story from your childhood or a memory that's specific to you that kind of got you, that thrust you into storytelling, I would love to hear how y'all got started.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for having me. I think there are two kinds of things that are in my mind about the answer to that question. One is that when I was a kid, for whatever reason, every kid is sort of, I think, born with an inborn sense of their own interests, tastes, desires, all that kind of thing. And to me, I always found it exciting to watch comedians and to see solo performance, and I liked poetry and all those kinds of things, right? And so when I was a kid, I was involved in plays, and I was on the competitive speech team, and any opportunity to get up in front of people and be a ham was something that appealed to me. And on the other hand, my mom was very interested, and still is very interested in like people's real lives, read a lot of autobiographies and biographies, and knew the interesting backstories behind old movies and that kind of thing. She's really interested in that, and that passed that on to me, right? And so I got very fascinated by people's lives. And when while that was happening, like when I was a young person in the teens and 20s and that kind of thing, biography on A&E was huge. Behind the Music was huge. There were lots of different places where on cable television and different places where you could see these stories of real people's lives. And I was just, absorbed in that. So you put these two things together where I had this real interest in performance and then a real interest in the stories of people's lives, and putting those two together. And I think that, to me, is part of the way in which I arrived at being a storyteller and also teaching storytelling, and writing about it and all those kinds of things.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, I totally, I get that. I mean, from a very young age too, for me, it was my dad, and he was a fireman. And so like, I don't remember a time when I wasn't like in and around the fire station and just hearing stories from my dad about the downtime they had at the fire station. Just so many great stories came out of that. And then of course they have a lot of time to watch movies and shows. So like it was very much like same for me in some ways, but I love that.
I mean, that's absolutely right. And I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, and I think that we sometimes think about performance or storytelling as being something that is just for a certain category or type of person. But as you point out, like there are great storytellers who are firemen, who are farmers, who are my dad used to eat lunch almost every day at this place called the Dingaling Bar and Grill. Like there's guys around the Dingaling that are like, great raconteurs and storytellers. And it's for everyone, I guess, is part of what that tells me.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Well, so I guess we could talk, we could jump ahead to like more recent, or we could, continue with your childhood. But do you remember the first time you ever got in front of a crowd and had to tell a personal story? I guess that could have been in school, or it could have been like later on once you realized that you had a gift for this and a desire. It could have been more of a competition. But if you remember, I don't know if there's a time when you kind of remember like what set the trajectory for you as far as your performance and getting in front of a crowd.
Sure. I mean, so I was in front of a crowd not talking about myself and not doing storytelling for decades, right? And different contexts. So I was in plays, and I coached speech competitions, and I was a speech competitor in college and that kind of thing. But in that setting, you're not really telling stories about yourself.
Yeah.
But it was when I was in graduate school getting my PhD that I took a class where I did a story about myself, and it was very well received in the class. And then it was they asked me to do it at this sort of evening of performance, like the best performances from a couple different classes. It was very well received there, and I felt like I had sort of a knack for understanding how it could be put together and where pause should go and all that kind of thing. Because I had spent all that time in all those other performance venues, it just soaks into you over time, where you're just like, I know how timing works, and I know how jokes work, and I know how what I don't need to say and that they'll still get, and that kind of thing. So I found that very appealing, that I could talk about my own experience and people would really respond to it well, and I felt good about it. There was a real pause though for me, because, and this is true of a lot of people, I didn't really feel like I had anything important to say, because I've lived a pretty privileged life in all kinds of different ways, right? And so I haven't had a ton of big events, that have come across in my life that are like these serious things we tell in a storytelling show. But over time, what I learned from working with students and coaching and teaching students, that number one, you don't have to talk about the biggest, worst things that have ever happened to you. In fact, you often shouldn't. And number two is that if you're going to be a storyteller and have a repertoire, you have to be able to take regular things that happen to you and turn them into stories and convey them in a way that is interesting and fun, and also suggests that story has some meaning or shows us something about the human condition, even though it's about an everyday small thing. And so over time, I really came to understand that. But it was only by coaching students first for like many years in storytelling that I was able to then really do it effectively by myself in terms of coming up with the material. I always had the performance skill set, but I didn't have the material, and that took time. And that was very gratifying when you eventually, see that stuff over time, a kernel of an idea that grows into something, and you do it someplace, maybe in a coffee shop or something like that. And then over time, it starts to develop and grow, and then it gets really good, and you're really proud of it, and people respond to it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm still new to this whole storytelling scene, and so it's only been less than 2 years, like 18 months, I guess, since my daughter and I listened to The Moth, and I've listened to storytelling for a long time, but being in like the scene, as far as like getting to know people who do it regularly, that's fairly new.
Sure.
But after my daughter and I got involved with The Moth, I bought a book called Storyworthy by Matthew Dix, which is in the Moth community. He's like won more Story Slams and Grand Slams than anyone. But that's his book. There's a whole section in there about he calls it like homework, basically. It's homework for life. And it's basically just keeping a spreadsheet. And so the thing that he's done now for 20 plus years is at the end of every day, he just tries to think of one regular moment from that day that he can put in this spreadsheet, that then over time he can go back and look at these moments and kind of cultivate, again, from very everyday, mundane things that happen. These amazing stories come out of it, because as you learn his whole point was, we miss so much of life, and things really slow down when you start thinking about the mundane. And it just opens up this whole other world that if you're just kind of skating through life, you miss so many important...
Absolutely.
So I think for you as a professor and thinking about these students, that's invaluable for them to, at this age, already be thinking in that mindset, because that's going to help them so much.
Yes. And I think even if they never get up and tell another story after I've worked with them in academic context, it also helps you see the world, as you're pointing out. It helps you see the world that way. It also helps you see yourself in a different way, because you have to start getting really real about your motivations and why you chose to do the things that you did in that day, right? And why you responded the way you responded to those people. Or understanding when you're telling a story about your childhood, you have to start thinking about your parents, maybe their characters in the story. You have to think about their motives and what was in their heads when you were a little kid, in a way different way than you did when you were a little kid, right? You have to be more understanding and thoughtful about what was going on with them. And that sort of self-reflection process that happens there, I sometimes tell people that storytelling is really like a radical confrontation with yourself. Because you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself about how people see you and perceive you. And you have to be honest with yourself about what happened in the story and why you did what you did. And then also, for a lot of people, even me too, like you have to be honest with yourself about like how much you're going to prepare and how you're going to deal with the fear that comes up when you stand up in front of an audience. Everybody gets a little bit nervous in front of an audience. You should get a little nervous. If you don't get a little nervous, something's wrong, because that little bit of nervousness like ignites you and gets you going, right?
Right.
But I do a one-person show that is an evening of storytelling that I do. It's like an hour, and when I started doing that, I was like, how am I going to remember an hour? And what if I get lost? And what will happen if I'm lost in front of an audience? And like, you have to get very real with yourself about how do you, on one hand, manage that fear, and on the other hand, still accomplish what you want to accomplish, which is doing the show. Right?
Yeah.
So it teaches you all kinds of things that have nothing to do with storytelling, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, so many life lessons, and even thinking about, so when my wife and I came to one of your events recently and heard your students tell stories, and we were both just blown away. And again, I think for me it was, like you said, you have these opportunities to reflect on your life, and I was in that moment listening to these, 18 to 22-year-olds tell these stories, and I was thinking about myself at that age and thinking, like, wow, like I can't imagine at that age doing what they did. I can now, but I'm 20 plus years beyond that.
Right.
And so anyway, it was just really impressive. And so when I think about what you do and just your involvement in the storytelling community, it's amazing. So that was my next question. My lead in was like, when you think about this community that you're involved in now, whether it's and just in Atlanta in storytelling abroad, or your job at KSU, like how would you say that your involvement in that community has impacted and affected you, or what are some of the highlights for you?
So I teach storytelling every semester, and a lot of the work we do is either in public on campus or in public off campus, and having that public performance elevates students, right? And so makes them work harder to get it right. And that has been so exciting and fun to watch and to be a part of. And it shows them things and teaches them things that an in-class performance absolutely wouldn't. But the most important and valuable thing I've gotten out of all of this is working with those students, finding out who they are, finding out the things that are important to them, what their life history is, their personal histories are. It has shown me so much. It is like this anthropological study that I've been doing for like 15 years of undergraduates, what happens when you teach them storytelling and ask them to open up about themselves. And you see them see their life in a different way. Also, we sometimes talk about my storytelling troupe on campus as the island of misfit toys. It's like, if you're like, it's for people who kind of maybe don't fit neatly into boxes in other places, where a lot of times what I would call capital T theater asks you to do is to fit neatly into boxes, into casting and that kind of thing. But you can be unapologetically yourself in storytelling. And in fact, you have to be, or it won't function very well. And so it allows people to be like the star in the light in front of the audience, talking about themselves in a performance they created, and the audience is laughing and they're crying and they're right with them, right? And to give people the opportunity to stand there in the lights and sort of conduct and control the room is incredible to see young people grow in that process, and to see them do it a couple of times. My class is something you can repeat more than once for credit. And so you can see people do it more than once, and as they do it like the third or fourth time, they're changed fundamentally, and in their confidence and their self-perception and all that kind of thing. So that is by far the most fun thing and the most sort of important thing I've gotten out of it.
I love that. Well, and like I said, we came to that show just recently, and we were like, we caught on to that even just from being in the room. Like, you could tell the relationship you have with your storytellers, the relationship they have with each other. They all felt you could tell they felt very comfortable. And again, nervous, like you said, you wouldn't be normal if you weren't nervous. But like, once they were on the stage and telling their story, like, it was really cool to get that glimpse of, okay, I feel like I know a little bit about this person I've never met because I see them like how they
So
are.
how we do it on this show you're describing is that we have like, it's like 8 students, and we're all lined up sort of sitting in a kind of half circle against the back wall of the theater, and I'm sitting towards the middle, and I introduce each one. But you can watch them watching each other,
Yes.
and you can see them the whole time. And so it gives you this sense that you kind of know them before you've even seen them speak. And then I introduce them and sort of say a little bit of something about them.
Yeah.
And it gives you this sense that you've met them before. And there's immediate intimacy, I think.
Yeah, it was a beautiful thing. So we really enjoyed it. And so if you're watching this and you want to go see a great show, definitely keep an eye out.
KSU Tellers,
yes,
end of the semester showcase every
yes,
semester.
for sure. Well, so as we're kind of getting close to the end here, thinking about those storytellers and those students, and even the Atlanta at Broad, if you were to talk to someone on campus who had never done storytelling before and were thinking about, hey, I want to take your class, what advice would you give to someone who's never done this, who has ideas and who's maybe seen it, but the idea of getting on a stage in front of people is like terrifying. What would you tell someone that was interested in getting into storytelling?
I actually have that conversation a lot, because when I talk to people about, when you interact with people, they ask you, what do you do? And that's kind of tell them I teach storytelling among other things. And they're like, oh, I could never do that, but I think it'd be interesting. And I'm like, why couldn't you? Why can't you do it? Like, that's what I think human beings do all the time. Most people come home and somebody asks them, well, how was your day? And you say, well, da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And here's all the things that happened. And when we think about our families and our past, we tell stories. That's almost all framed in stories. When you get an old picture of yourself and you're like holding a toy you got for your birthday, like that speaks story out to it, right? So I think it's what everyone's meant to do. Like and not everybody's comfortable talking in public, but everybody tells stories. And so that's the first thing you got to get your head around. Second of all, if you have the inkling that that's something you want to do, you want to find a low stakes environment like a coffee shop or a show of some kind where there's like an open mic or something like that, where you can get up and tell stories, or a story swap at a storytelling festival, that kind of thing. Those places are very forgiving, and you can just try it out. And if you try it and you get up in front of people and you get some response from an audience, for most people that's it. They're hooked, because we all want that sense of recognition. We want people to see us. We want them to understand us. We want to feel validated as human beings, and that's a tremendous way to upsize validation, right? It's like me in front of a whole room full of people, and they have to like laugh at my jokes, and they have to cry when I make them cry, and that kind of thing. They don't have to, but they're gonna, right? Because they're along for the ride. And that's maybe the last thing I would tell somebody is like, remember that an audience always wants you to succeed. They don't want to watch someone fail. Everybody's very uncomfortable with that. So they're like, I hope it works. I hope he's okay. I hope it's going well. And so they're usually very forgiving, and they will like do mental gymnastics to like make it work for them. That like whatever you did worked for them. And so you can remember that as well. I think is a valuable thing to remember as well. People want you to succeed.
For sure.
It's the thing you're supposed to be doing as a human being. And that if you try it, if you can get the gumption up to try it, and it feels good, then it'll stick.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that, because again, just until 18 months ago, I had never gotten in front of a crowd and shared a story, and I probably should have picked a lower stakes. I started off and jumped right in at the Moss, which I didn't know any better,
No, that's perfect.
But again, it was one of those things where, I was so nervous, but once I was on that stage, and like you said, once you see people's faces and that they are engaged and they want to hear what you have to say, and then even afterward, people coming up and saying, I had a similar experience, or I really resonated with this. And so what it taught me was, as much as it is a performance, it's more of an opportunity to connect with other humans. And we all, in every story we hear, there's something that you can find in it that resonates because the shared human experience. And so I think for me, that's been one of the real gifts of being part of this and getting to interview people like you and all the people that I've interviewed so far, and the shows that we're doing, and just seeing people's response. Again, that's just a reminder that we all, we're connected in a way that, is beautiful. So
Absolutely.
Well, I'm so excited that January 27th that you're going to be with us on stage at Eddie's Attic for another show.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't be more thrilled that you're going to be part of the show. I'm excited for you to be
wait.
there. And so if you're watching this and you're interested, we'd love for you to come out Eddie's Attic, January 27th. Charles Parrott will be there with us, along with 5 other fantastic storytellers and live music. So we're looking forward to it. But again, Charlie, thank you so much for sitting down and talking.
You bet.
And I can't wait to come to more KSU Tellers shows and to finally get to hear you perform. I mean, I've watched, online, but to see you at the show, I'm really excited.
It's much better in person.
Yeah,
much better in person.
Yes. So,
well, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much. I'm sure we'll see you again.